Welcome to Drive the Daf, clear, structured explanation of the daily daf in 20 minutes. You can even follow in the car.
Shabbos Daf Tzadi Aleph contains one Mishnah. We can split the daf in half. From the beginning of the daf until the Mishnah is discussing the concept of achshevei, where something is halachically insignificant to most people, but you consider it significant and therefore it's significant to you. Then we get to the Mishnah, which discusses the halachas of akira and hanacha, when you can combine a lifting up and a putting down of an object to a malacha of carrying, and when you can't combine it. So the first part of the daf is a commentary on the Mishnah which we just saw at the end of the last daf, which is the first Mishnah in the 10th parak of Masechta Shabbos, which had listed the concept that if you consider something significant, then it's significant to you. So even though it's too small to be significant to most people, for you it is significant. So for example, if you carry out one seed to plant, most people that would be an insignificant amount, but to you it is significant, and therefore you're chayav for carrying for that action. The Gemara is going to do as follows. The Gemara will have a couple of comments or questions on this. Then the Gemara will have two chains of questions. First of all, we're going to compare situations where the size of the object changed. Can you combine the situation that it was in when you lifted it up to the situation that it was in when you put it down if things changed? And the second chain of questioning will be about the topic of if you have a certain size which is too small in the halacha that you're dealing with, but it is significant in a different halacha, does that make it significant for your size as well? So first of all, we're starting a few lines in here. The Gemara says that Rav Meir holds that if a single kernel of wheat, if you take it out to plant it, with intent to plant it, that counts, it's significant to you, you are planting it, and therefore you're chayav for carrying on Shabbos. The Gemara says it's obvious. Our Mishnah said if you take something out to plant it, you're chayav. And a Mishnah without a name is usually Rabbi Meir. So what are you adding over here? So the Gemara explains. You may have thought when he said any amount, when the Mishnah said any amount that you intend to plant is significant, maybe it meant you don't need to have the normal amount for food. Wheat is food, right? So maybe you don't have to have the normal amount for food, which is the size of a dried fig, a gregaris. Maybe it's enough if you have less than that, but maybe you still need a certain size. Maybe you need a kizayis, an olive size or something. Here we're coming to tell you, no, one seed is enough to plant, that's all you need. Okay. Now the Gemara says, is this really true that just because you consider something to be significant, it counts as significant for you? Why don't we just say that no, what most people consider as what's important? Okay? So the Gemara says that Rabbi Yitzchak, Rabbi Yehuda asked, let's say somebody says, I intend to take out my entire household full of stuff. That's what I consider significant. Less than that, it's not worth it for me. So you're going to say for a guy like that, then if he takes out half the things in his house, it's not significant? So the Gemara says no, because that's very strange. And therefore his understanding of significance is batel to everybody else. It's useless. It doesn't count for anything. It's only when some people do think this way, and you think that way, so therefore it counts. But if nobody thinks that way, and you're doing something completely weird, then it doesn't count at all. Okay. Now, the Gemara had said that if you consider a certain one seed significant, then for you, if you carry it, you're chayiv, and not only that, you're the only one who's chayiv if you carry it. If somebody else carries your one seed, he's not chayiv. The Gemara says that's not like Rav Shimon ben Elazar, because Rav Shimon ben Elazar has said that if somebody stores something away, he saves it, he considers it significant, somebody else comes and carries that very thing, then for him it's a malacha also. Even though he wouldn't consider it significant because that object was considered significant by somebody, then he is chayiv. Okay, now the Gemara has a chain of questions or statements by Rava, the name of Rav Nachman. Now, as we know, in order to violate the halacha of carrying on Shabbos, you have to lift the object up, you have to do an akira, you have to move it from being at rest, and you have to place it down to being at rest later. So the questions will be as follows. Let's say the size of the object shifted or changed, or your intent of what you wanted to do with the object shifted or changed. As we know, the minimum size for carrying depends on what you intended to do with it. If you intend to plant it, any size counts. If you intend to eat it and it's food, then the minimum size is the size of a dried fig. We'll have 4 cases here. In all the cases, there was a change either in your intent or in the size or both from when you picked it up to when you put it down. Now, in all the cases, you had the right size for the intent you had at that time. But things may have changed. So first of all, the first case is where The size stayed the same, but your intent changed. The question is, if your intent changes, is that enough to separate the picking up and the putting down? So it's two separate halachas. So the case is where you picked it up and you intended to eat it, and you put it down, you were intending to plant it. All along, though, it was big enough to be chayav for either of them. It was the size of a dried fig. So the Gemara says, Rav Nachman says it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if your intent changed along the way. It still combines, and it's one malach, and you're chayav for that. Now the question is, what if the size changed? Now, you had the right amount in the beginning to go all the way. If your intent would have stayed the same, but your intent changed and the size changed to match your intent. So does that count? So what's the case? You picked up this piece of food with intent to plant it, and it was very small. It was too small to be chayav for eating it. Then it grew, and you changed your mind, decided you want to plant it. Okay, so when you picked it up, it was the right size for what you wanted to do. When you put it down, it was the right size for what you wanted to do. However, when you picked it up, it was not the right size for what you ended up wanting to do when you put it down. Is that a problem? Does your original intent have to match your final size? Does your original size have to match the final intent? So Gemara says, okay, we're not sure. It could be not. Because if you think about it, when you picked it up, you were intending to plant it. So that intent had the right size all along. If you would have stuck with the intent to plant it, you would never have had a problem. Later you changed your intent, but the size changed along with it, so fine. So the Gemara says, okay, let's say you're going to say that. As long as your intent in the beginning fit with the size all along, that's okay. What if it was the opposite? What if you picked it up with intent to eat it? And it was the right size for that. It was the size of a dried fig. And then it shrunk, and you changed your mind to plant it. So again, when it shrunk, your intent matched. It was the right size. But when you picked it up, it was not your intent when you lifted it up was to eat it. That size didn't stay. It shrunk past that size. So if you had not changed your intent, it would have not been the right size. So what do you say there? Now, let's assume that you're going to answer that and say that that's okay. That's not a problem. As long as your intent matched the size, whenever your intent was, whenever the size was, that's okay. What happens if it shrunk in between? You picked it up with intent to eat it, and you put it down with intent to eat it. But in between, it shrunk to be too small, and then it blew up again to being the right size. So in between, it was the wrong size. What happens there? So the Gemara says, all these cases, Teiku, we don't have an answer to whether it combines or not. Okay, now Rava has a new questions, a new series here. And here the questions are about what happens if you have a size which is too small for your halacha, but it is the right size for a different halacha. Is the fact that it's significant for a different halacha make it significant for your halacha or not? What's the case? So the question is, if somebody has a concise, an olive size of truma, and he throws it into a tamei house, so the olive becomes a tamei. Is that enough to be chayav for Shabbos? It's too small to be chayav for carrying on Shabbos, but it is the right size for becoming tamei. So first of all, the Gemara says over here, what's the question exactly? I don't understand the issue. As far as Shabbos is concerned, it's too small. As far as Tumah is concerned, it's too small. So what's the case? So the Gemara says the case is that you threw it into a house that was tamei, and it landed right next to another piece of truma, and combined with that piece of truma, big enough to become the minimum size to be tamei. So the piece you threw is significant enough to create tumah together with where it landed. Do you say that since the piece is significant enough to create tumah there, it's also significant enough to make you chayav for throwing it from one Rosh to another on Shabbos? So this question was asked from Rav to Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman says we learned the answer. It's a brisa. Abba Shaul says concerning the lechem hapanim, which was like a carbon in the Beis Hamikdash, and the shtei lechem, which is a special similar carbon for Shavuos. Minimum size for carrying that to be chayav Shabbos is a gurgeris, is a size of a dried fig. We don't go with the smaller size of kezayis, which is the minimum size, to be violating the issur of taking it out of the Beis Hamikdash. You're not allowed to take these karbanas breads out of the azara. So that minimum olive size is only enough for the halacha of taking it out of the azara. It's not enough for the halacha of carrying. So you see, the fact that it's significant concerning one halacha does not make it significant for the halacha of carrying on a Shabbos. So the Gemara says it's not quite a good comparison, and there's no proof from there. Because the Isser of taking it out of the Azara and the Isser of Shabbos happens at separate moments, and therefore you don't have a moment where that size is significant for both things. You don't have a case where it's a minimum size for taking it out of the Azara, and therefore it should also count for carrying, because the carrying happens later. Because as soon as you take it out of the Azara, you did not do Chil Shabbos yet. You're still in Rosh Hashanah. It only becomes Rosh Hashanah when you leave the Beis Hamikdash grounds. So for that, it's already, by the time you're doing that, by the time you're carrying it into a Rosh Hashanah, it's already insignificant what size it is concerning taking it out of the Azara, because that already happened. So therefore, it wouldn't be significant. That makes sense that the fact that it's significant for that halacha doesn't count for this halacha, because by the time you're getting to Chil Shabbos, it never happens. However, in our case, you threw it into the house, it became tamei, and you're chayav for carrying on Shabbos, potentially, at the same instant. So since it's significant for one, it should be significant for the other. My question still stands. Okay, we have one more question here on this Mishnah before we get to the next one. The last halacha in the Mishnah was the person who carried a seed out into Rosh Hashanah to plant it. If he changes his mind and decides he doesn't want to plant it anymore, it's not significant to him anymore, so then when he brings it back in, he's not chayav for that act of carrying. So the Gemara says that should be obvious. So for sure not. If it's not important to him, then it's the same as everybody else. And he's not chayav for such a small amount for only one seed. So the Gemara answers, Abai says, we're talking about where he never actually said that he's not considering it significant anymore. We're trying to figure it out based on his actions. What he did was that he threw it back into the storehouse, but he threw it in such a way it's in the storehouse, but it's not mixed with all the other seeds. So is that called that he still has significance for it because it's not mixed with the other seeds, or is it called that it's not significant anymore because he threw it back into the storehouse? So our Mishnah teaches us, and since he threw it in the storehouse, he doesn't consider it significant anymore, and therefore he's not chayav for carrying it. Okay, now we get to the next Mishnah. Now, there are two completely independent, unrelated halachas in this Mishnah. The only connection is that they're both talking about an askupa. An askupa was the front step of a person's house. That front step could count as either a Rosh Hashanah, a Rosh Hashanah, or a Carmelis. Let's remember, the halacha of carrying works as follows. Carrying from one Rosh Hashanah to another, Rosh Hashanah to Rosh Hashanah, or vice versa, is an Isser D'Oraisa of carrying. Going to a Carmelis or from a Carmelis is only an Isser D'Rabbanan. This threshold could be any of those three things. It depends what it is. If it is 10 tvachim tall, and it's surrounded by walls going down, it's high, 10 tvachim, and it's 4x4 on the surface, it's a Rosh Hashanah. If it is between 3 tvachim and 9 tvachim, then it's a Carmelis, and if it is between 9 and 10 tvachim, or less than 3 tvachim, then it serves the rabbim. Why? It serves the rabbim if it's 9 because it's the right height for people to adjust their packages on, and it serves the rabbim if it's less than 3 because you could step on it. So this front stoop could count as any of those three things. And the Gemara is going to explain that we are talking about a case where it's a Carmelis. The first halacha is as follows. If you take something out of your house and you put it down on the stoop, you're not chayiv. The Gemara explains it's got to be talking about where the stoop is not a Rosh Hashanah. Otherwise, you'd be chayiv for taking it out of your house and putting it on the stoop. Then somebody comes and he picks it up and takes it off into the street. He's not chayiv either. Why? Again, the Gemara says it's obviously not Rosh Hashanah because then he'd be chayiv for taking it from Rosh Hashanah to Rosh Hashanah. It's got to be talking about where it's a Carmelis, where it is between 3 to 9 tvachim high. Now, the chiddush of the Mishnah is that even though it went from Rosh Hashanah to Rosh Hashanah, there is no issue of carrying here because it stopped in between. As opposed to if you had carried it straight across the stoop, then you would have an isser, even though you passed across the stoop, it is a Carmelis in between. It doesn't break up the two actions. So the Gemara says this is not like the halacha of Ben Azai. Ben Azai disagrees. Ben Azai says, and we had this earlier in the Masechta, if somebody carries from a store to the Rosh Hashanah and he passes over the seating area on the way, which is a Carmelis, so it's called two separate activities. We view when he's crossing over the Carmelis in between the Rosh Hashanah and the Rosh Hashanah, we view it as a freeze frame, as if he stopped, and it breaks up the actions into two separate things. From the Rosh Hashanah to the Carmelis, that's only D'Rabbanan, and then from the Carmelis to the Rosh Hashanah. Now that, Ben Azai says that's even if he never stopped. Our Mishnah is saying that it's only if he stopped. If he didn't stop, then he would be chayiv. It's considered one action. Okay, now we get to the second halacha in the Mishnah and the Gemara on it. The second halacha is concerning where you only put something out on the stoop, and it's partially in Rishos Harabim. Here, the stoop is a for Rishos Harabim. It could just as easily be any other situation where you took an object from Rishos HaYachid into Rishos Harabim. But the thing is, the object's kind of on the edge. It's partially in Rishos Harabim, and it's partially in Rishos HaYachid. Now, everybody agrees in a situation where the object itself is partially in Rishos Harabim, and it is partially in Rishos HaYachid, that you're not chayav, you haven't considered like you transferred it from Rishos to Rishos yet. The question is, what if the entire object is in Rishos Harabim, but it is in a box, and the box is partially in Rishos Harabim and partially out of Rishos Harabim? What's the story there? Do you say that the box makes it like it's still in Rishos Harabim, or part of the object itself has to be in Rishos Harabim and the box doesn't help? So this is a machlokes between Chizkiah and Rav Yochanan. Chizkiah says the box doesn't make a difference, and Rav Yochanan says no, the box keeps it like it's in Rishos Harabim. Now, our Mishnah has a conflicting language, and the Gemara points out it doesn't fit with each of them. The Mishnah says as follows: if you put a box full of fruit outside, so even though the majority of each fruit is outside, it doesn't count like it's outside until the entire box is outside. So first you tell me it's not a problem as long as the majority of the fruit, as long as part of the fruit is inside. Then you tell me that it's only a problem if the entire box is outside. So it's conflicting. First you talk about the fruit, then you talk about the box. So that's conflicting reports as to whether if you have just the fruit but not the box, whether that's considered like it's still partially in and partially out, and it would be not chayav yet. So the Gemara says both Chizkiah and Rav Yochanan will have to work this out, and the Gemara says this is how they resolve it. Chizkiah says we're referring to a situation where the box is filled with very long fruits. So the entire box is in, then the entire fruit is in. If part of the box is out, then part of the fruit is out. So really it has to do with the fruits. We're not interested in the box. And all we mean to say, the reason why we use the term box and fruit interchangeably is because the entire box is filled up with very long fruits. Okay, but really it's about the fruits, it's not about the box. Now, Rav Yochanan says, no, this is how you read it. You read it as follows: even though the majority of the fruits is out, as long as part of the fruits is still in Rishos HaYachid, it's not considered carrying it. And even if the entire fruit, this is what he's inserting, even if the entire fruit is in Rishos Harabim, it's still not a problem until the entire box is out. Meaning it's like a leizu afsu. That if a part of the fruit is out, it's not a problem. And even if the entire fruit is out, it's not a problem until, and this is how the Mishnah ends off, until the entire box is out. Only then is it a problem. Okay, now the Gemara is going to try to bring a few proofs whether the box being partially in saves the object which is completely out of the Rishos HaYachid. So the first proof is a simple one. It's Raya against Chizkiah. We have a case of a spice seller who placed a basket of spices partially in and out of Rishos Harabim. So the Brisa says until the entire basket is out of Rishos HaYachid, it's out of Rishos HaYachid, that's when he's chayav. So then where it says, so let's assume that we are discussing where there are very small pieces of spice inside the thing. So when part of the basket is out into Rishos Harabim, there are already entire pieces that are out. So that should not fit with Chizkiah, who says that the fact that the box is in doesn't help you. So the Gemara says, no, we're actually discussing here very long spices, and it's filling up the entire box, and that's why if part of the box is in, it helps you. Not because the box makes a difference, but because if some of the box is in, then some of the items themselves are still inside. Okay, now the Gemara has another raya, and this time it is a proof to Chizkiah. And it's from the following halacha: if you do two isurim at the same time, you only get the punishment for the larger one. You don't get the smaller one. So what if somebody steals an object on Shabbos? So the moment that he takes it out of the rishus of the victim, he's both being machal Shabbos and stealing. Stealing is the smaller punishment. He shouldn't get that one. So we have a brisa that says if he picks it up and he walks out with it, he gets both. Why? Because the moment he lifted it up, he wasn't machal Shabbos yet, and he's already stolen it. It's come into his rishus. Later, when he's going to carry it out of the house, then he's machal Shabbos, and therefore it's two separate times, and it's not usher. However, if he drags a money bag across the property line, then the moment that it crosses the property line, he's both machal Shabbos and stealing, and therefore he can only get the bigger punishment for Shabbos, not the smaller one for stealing. So the Gemara says, hold on a second. when it crosses the property line, as soon as he could reach the coins outside the property line, as soon as he could reach it, it's already stolen. That means that as soon as the mouth of the bag crosses the property line, even though the coins are still inside the victim's rishus, he's already considered stealing it. Now, he was not machal Shabbos yet, according to Rabbi Yochanan, until the entire bag crosses the property line, because as long as the bag is partially in, he's still considered to be not fully out yet. And if it's not fully out yet, then it's not Mechal Shabbos yet. So the stealing and the Mechal Shabbos happen at different moments. As soon as the mouth of the bag crosses Rishos, he's already has access to it, and therefore it's considered to be stolen. Later, when the entire bag will come out, then it'll be that he's actually Mechal Shabbos. So the Gemara first wants to say, Rabbi Yochanan would say, you're right. If you're dragging it out mouth of the bag first, then you're right. As soon as the mouth crosses the thing, he's Mechal, he's already stolen because he has access to it. What's happening here, he's dragging it out at the bottom of the bag going first, and therefore he doesn't have access to it until the mouth crosses, and that's the last thing to cross the property line. So at the same moment, he has access to the coins, and it's Chil Shabbos because the entire bag is over the property line. The Gemara says, but hold on a second, but even when the bottom of the bag crosses the property line, he could still have access to the coins that are inside because he could rip the seam at the bottom of the bag, and therefore from the moment that the bottom of the bag crosses the line, it's already stolen. But it's not Chal Shabbos until the entire bag crosses the property line. So the Gemara says a different answer. The Gemara says that the bag was filled with long silver bars that fill up the entire bag, and therefore you don't have anything fully over the property line inside the bag until the entire bag crosses the property line. Therefore, he didn't steal anything until the Chol Shabbos happens. That's why they both happen at the same time, and he doesn't get the punishment for stealing. So the Gemara says, what about the drawstrings? The strings of the bag are trailing behind it. They don't cross the property line until after the bars are across, until the entire bag itself is across. That comes earlier. So Gemara says either we're referring to where there's no strings, or the strings are wrapped around the bag, and therefore you don't get stealing until the entire thing is across the property line, after they both happen at the same moment. Okay, that'll be the end for Daf Tzadi Aleph, and we'll pick up this discussion in Daf Tzadi.
Drive the Daf is a project of the Grand Woodlands Shul and is presented by Rabbi Yitzchak Landa. Find us on YouTube or subscribe to daily emails by emailing drivethedaf@gmail.com.